hit real bad, and they started shutting everything down, and they shut the jail down also with it. And I was in the jail, and I contracted COVID-19. I contracted COVID-19 from the jail from my roommate. And once I contracted COVID-19, when I first got sick, like you never know what's the real reason why you're sick until you find out that you got it or you know the symptoms of it. And I'm hoping everybody can hear me. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. And when I contracted, I let the nurses know, I let the officers know that I had symptoms of the COVID-19, and it was like it was nothing done. My roommate was first sick. He was sick. He went to medical at least 3 times back to back. They didn't take him out of the cell until like his temperature was like 101, 104, and they took him to medical. Once they took him to medical, maybe 72 hours later, I was feeling symptoms of the COVID-19, and I let them know. They took me to medical. They brought me back to the dorm and took me back down there. Then they brought me back again. They never informed us about the COVID-19 or the precautions to take when it first happened. No one never spoke to us. They never posted anything up or nothing like that. So once I was being held for testing, they took me to an ISO cell, supposed to be isolation cells that's messed up with all kind of feces and all kind of urine and whatever else you can name, old food, plus the COVID-19 that's in your body. You got all this going on while you in this cell. It was an ISO cell. I was in cell 12, and it was the nastiest cell I ever been in my life. You know, they put you back there, supposed to be a medical cell in the back of medical, and they hold you back there for your testing and your quarantine. So they tested me, and my test came back positive for COVID-19. And when I tell you that the experience that I had with this, it's like whenever you if you never had it, you just hear about it and you're watching it on TV and you'll see or you're hearing it from the TV or from other people. The first thing you think when you get it is you're gonna die. Those are the first thoughts in your head, like I'm gonna die. I got COVID-19 because that's what was being put out there. So they tested me. The test came back, and they said I was positive. They still had me in this cell, which is not an isolation cell because it was the nastiest cell that you could ever be in. Like you had to fight the COVID-19 and the fumes from old food, feces, urine, mold, bugs. You have to fight all this right here at one time. And you don't have no contact with nobody. They had us down there. They had me down there for at least 10 days. And out of them 10 days that I stayed down there in their unit, I mean, in the ISO cell and in a big holding cell in the back, we haven't had showers in over 9 days that they had us down there. Like we had the same boxers, same socks, same t-shirts, and the same uniforms on for 9 days. They kept me down there in the cell. They moved me from the ISO cell to a cell with 8 other inmates who tested positive for. And at the time, the newspapers and the jail was saying there was only one positive test in the jail, which was the female, and that was a lie. Once you are back there in them ISO cells, you don't get no phone calls, you don't get no showers, you don't get none of the above. You don't even get to see an officer unless they come around with the nurse to take your temperature or show you your food. That's the only time you see anyone. So I left from the ISO cell and went to the big holding cell, and it was 8 of us in there. Like I said, all 8 of us are sick. All 8 of us in there are sick from COVID-19 from the test they did on us. We stayed down there for at least 9 days or seven, but between 7 to 10 days, and then they moved us from out of that cell, which was no better than any cell they put you in the jail, as far as being quarantined because the cell was nasty. There was no cleaning supplies. They didn't give you no medication. They didn't give you no medical attention unless the nurse came back there to take your temperature. That's the only time you really seen someone back there to help you out. Period. If you was to get sick and fall down and die, the next person couldn't help you out back there because the officers don't answer. They don't answer the inmates. You can beat them the door, smash the buzzer, you can do whatever you need to do, but they're not going to answer until a nurse comes around, and that's like we're not humans, like we're not like we animals or test rats or something like that. That's how they treat you in jail with the COVID-19. They took me from there, holding cell, and put me in a holding cell, put me in a room by myself in another whole unit, and kept me down there for 7 days. Then once they had me down there, the same situation is mold in the cell. It's just nasty. You don't get to clean up. You don't get nothing that you need to help you when you got the COVID-19. It's the thing that I've been through. Like I was in the jail when it started. They took us to this holding cell, and took us to this other cells and put us in there for 7 days. And then once that 7 days was over, they gave you a paper to sign saying that they told you about the COVID-19. It was nothing stating that you still had it or you don't have it or nothing like that. It was just saying that we explained to you what you needed to do when you get back to the dorm or get back to the regular unit. They took me back to the regular unit and put me inside the unit with the same guy that I caught the COVID-19 from back in the room together. Me and him was back in the room together. They put us back in the room together and never tested us again. And once I come back in the same unit that I left from, it's like everybody on the whole unit is sick because nobody's being tested. Nobody want to go and get tested. The nurses, the officers, they don't. If you don't have any kind of headache or fever, then you don't have it. That's just point blank. Period. You know what I mean? So, and that's what was going on in this jail. Like they stayed away from you. They fed you like you was an animal. They would when you once you're in the cell, they reaches around to keep the cell door between us, and they reaches around and they give you your food or whatever they got to give you. You will not be treated like a human being. You being treated like an animal, and I can see that it's probably still going on right now in jail. I've been out of jail about a month now, back in society, and you just lose everything. If you're not strong, you're not strong person. If you're not a strong person, you will lose your mind because of the situation and how they treat you. Like they treat you like you are an animal. You know what I mean? They treat you like you're an animal. They hold you in jail, and luckily, I was I was helped by Life After Relief. They helped me out, got me out of jail, and I met some good people. And through my whole situation, PG County, PG County Jail is a breeding place for COVID-19. They don't give you nothing to help you out with the COVID-19. They don't give you no medicine. They don't give you no kind of medical attention. I watched the guy tell the lady that he had symptoms, tell the nurse that he had symptoms of COVID-19, and she just act like it was nothing else. Like it was over with. But that's my story, and it's a lot more probably to go with it that I could tell you. But that's my story, and I just wanted to put it out there to let people know that like this is really going on. If you hear it, it's really happening. It really happened. And I'm Michael Montgomery, and I'm just, I feel good to be able to tell my story so it can help other people out and people can understand what's going on in Peachy County Jail.
Thank you so much for your story, Mike. I appreciate you, and I'm glad that we've been able to assist you and to really help you build community and your return back into
Very,
society.
very, very. I appreciate everything that Life After Relief has done for me, Miss Mary Beth, everybody who's Miss Katie, everybody who's been there for me. I appreciate it. And if it wasn't for y'all, I don't know where I'd be. That's just like for every other person coming from jail or in jail.
Thank you, Michael. I thank you again for sharing your story. Really powerful, and paints a really clear picture about what's happening in the county jail. With that said, now I will turn it over to Kiana Johnson, Executive Director from Life After Release.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Thank you for everyone for joining us here today at this press conference so that we can let folks know about what exactly is happening inside of the Prince George's County Detention Center to Black and Brown individuals here in our county. My name is Kiana Johnson. I am the Executive Director of Life After Release, and I'm also a core organizer with Black Lives Matter DC. So I'm able to speak to today's issues from a very unique place of knowing exactly as a Prince George's County resident and also as a person who has been inside of those cages inside of Upper Marlboro, and also as an individual who's now on this side and doing some work as an activist in the community to let you know what is really going on, and also being able to watch and do things in the District of Columbia as well to kind of like give you a measuring stick to see where we are in justice and making sure that we are doing right by our Black and Brown people. So Life After Release, we bailed out Mr. Michael Montgomery about maybe 30 days or so ago. And in doing so, we were able to provide him with some wraparound services, some housing, because when he was incarcerated, he lost everything that he had. He lost his car was impounded. He lost his housing because he couldn't stay with his grandmother, who was 92 years old. And because he had already contracted the virus, he was afraid to go and to stay with his grandmother because he doesn't know how that would show up as a person who has tested positive and has overcome the virus. He doesn't know if he still can spread it or what have you. But either way, his grandmother is a very vulnerable population. And so because of that, he's lost his housing, his car, and we were able to help him kind of get back on his feet. We were able to help him get a job, and to basically just be there in community with Mr. Montgomery. Um, since the pandemic has started, Life After Release has we have bailed out 6 people, 7 in total. One of the people that we bailed out actually was arrested and charged in Washington County. So Prince George's County, we won't count that against your numbers, but that person was a Prince George's County resident. So we bailed out 6 individuals. All of the individuals that we have bailed out have been Black. I'm sorry, 5 of the individuals that we bailed out have been Black, and one of the individuals that we bailed out is a Latino woman who was the age 18 years old. The lowest bond that we have paid has been $500, which was for Mr. Montgomery, and the highest bond that we have paid has been $20,000 at 100%, which means we paid $20,000, and that was for the 18-year-old Latino woman who was charged as an adult, of course, basically for getting into an argument with her stepfather, and was charged $20,000. And what I don't think people understand is what we have in this Prince George's County is a culture of you do the crime, then you should do the time mentality. And so what I want people to understand is that over 4,000 individuals who are locked up in Prince George's County within a year's time come from the community. They're community complaints, which that means that a officer did not necessarily catch that person in the act of doing something, that someone went down to the commissioner's office and filed these charges. A lot of our cases that we have bailed folks out, that has been like the underlying issue where this person was someone had gone down to the commissioner's office and made a statement that someone has done something to them or against them in a hurtful manner. And the reason why I think that's important is because we have a lot of different reasons for that being a thing, and for people actually going down and pressing charges against someone, and then for a judge or a commissioner to come in and set bond. Um, in 2017, a lot of advocacy organizations like the ACLU, Progressive Maryland, and some other organizations fought really hard for Rule 4216 to pass. And what this rule basically says is that the state of Maryland will be moving into more of a posture similar to Washington, D.C., where you will not have a money bail system. But that is not where we are, particularly in Prince George's County. the Color of Change and Life After Release back in February launched a court watching program in which we have been in the courts every single day and training the community how to go into the courts and how to watch the courts on bail. And so we have a pretty good amount of data that is basically telling folks that money bail is still a real issue in the county. And as I stated, Mr. Montgomery's bail was only $500. Um, so, and then we have the 18-year-old young lady whose bail was $20,000. So we still have this large range, and every crime that is charged is bailable, whether it's a murder or if it's just a simple theft. All of those all of those charges are bailable offenses. So I want individuals to know that as we are moving into the community and we are bailing folks out, that this is a very complex issue, and we have a county that is continuously, through our state's attorney's office and through our a county executive office, that is still stating that Prince George's County is not operating on a money bail system. And as you can see from Michael's case, and as you can see from the other cases in which we have bailed individuals out, that is simply not the case. We have a very horrible system right now where we are still charging our individuals, particularly our Black and Brown individuals, with money bail. And right now, in this climate of COVID-19, this is very, very problematic because everyone, most of the individuals that are held at the detention center are held in a pretrial status, which means that although they have been charged, they are not um, have not been found guilty of anything. So what we are doing as a society is we're putting individuals in, giving them a death sentence for just being accused of a crime. And I want that to kind of sit with folks and let folks really let that resonate for a moment. Even if you have the you do the time, you do the crime, do the time mentality, what we have to get into the understanding is the individuals who are sitting pre-trial in this detention center have not, the majority of them, the ones who are not sentenced, which are the majority of them, have not been convicted of any crimes. And so we call on the state's attorney and also the county executive to use their authority to release these individuals, right? We have a pretrial system where that is not working, that is completely broken. The pretrial system in the District of Columbia is one that is far, far more advanced than the one that we have here in Prince George's County. So we have a lot of work to do when it comes to our judicial system here in Prince George's County and the way that bails are being done. And what COVID-19 has come along and it has done is that it has magnified this issue that was already an issue before COVID-19, and just letting individuals and letting the community know that we have a far, far road ahead of us so that we can really get some true justice and to look anything like a cash, to remove cash bail from our system. We have a long way to go.
Are you ready for me? Great. Can you guys hear? All right. My name is Katie Chambly Ryan. I'm an attorney for the plaintiffs in the lawsuit against the Prince George's County Department of Corrections and Director McDonough. Right now, the court is about to have a hearing to consider new evidence that both the plaintiffs and defendants have put forward about whether more relief is needed than what the court has already ordered. The defendants are saying that everything has always been fine in the jail, that there was never an outbreak in the jail. And of course, the evidence simply does not support that. The independent inspector found that there was an enormous outbreak in the jail. And in fact, right now, the jail is at a low in numbers of testing, which, the experts that, we've put into evidence have explained that that is most likely the result of the fact that there was such a widespread outbreak that so many people in the jail have already had it. And that's why they're, at a lower part of the curve right now. However, another wave of this disease is coming, and it is imperative that the jail prepare for that now. What we have learned from talking to a large number of people detained in the jail and the people who represent them is that the things that the jail claims that it's doing are not actually being done. There is not effective checking for symptoms. Most critically, the jail is incredibly delayed in its response when people request medical help. This is a jail where the staff are not taking symptoms seriously, um, and where when people report symptoms, they're often laughed away or told that there's nothing that they can do. And you can actually see this. The jail submitted as part of their evidence what they allege to be symptom logs to show how thoroughly they've been checking people for symptoms. Well, what you see there is that according to the jail, no inmate has reported so much as a headache at that jail. So either there's some kind of public health miracle going on at that jail, or there's not a thorough check happening. And I think it's pretty clear which of those explanations makes more sense. Um, the jail's also taken a really, unfortunately, rigid approach even to the things that it has done in response to the court order. So, for example, one way to protect people who are at high risk of COVID who are detained in the jail is to make sure they're in a cell by themselves rather than with a cellmate. But the jail has tried to implement that. First of all, our understanding is it has not been fully implemented. But it has also been implemented in some cases in a very rigid manner, even in a way that makes people's health conditions worse. So one of the witnesses, we submitted a declaration for is a 60-year-old man with COPD, um, and he also has heart failure. He's been in the medical unit as long as he's been in the jail. He was moved to a medical isolation cell that has no ventilation whatsoever, where the walls are covered in feces. He was asked to clean not only that cell, but all the cells where COVID positive prisoners had just been housed. Um, they gave him extra snacks from commissary in order to have this extremely vulnerable man do that. And then they put him in this cell where he cannot breathe. And since he's been moved into isolation cell, he has had to have breathing treatments that he did not need before. So, even where it appears the jail is attempting to comply with the court order, it really looks more like a place that's trying to check a box and not somewhere that's actually being sensitive to the serious needs of the people that are detained there. Um, it's very troubling to see. On the plaintiff side, we have been willing to work with them to try to improve things at the jail. We are not seeing that sort of willingness on the other side. There's more of a focus on disproving what the evidence indisputably shows is happening in that jail, which is massive medical neglect and delays, and a real lack of compassion for the people who are completely dependent on those imprisoning them to protect them. They're more interested in disproving that than actually fixing the very, very serious problems that you see in the jail. And that's extremely concerning to plaintiffs. And so what we're hoping is that, we can show the court this evidence. We were very hopeful that a lot more improvement had happened in the jail than actually has. The one thing that does appear to be improved is that they did do a big round of testing at the jail, but there doesn't appear to be a clear plan for retesting. And so again, when the second wave comes, there needs to be some kind of structure at the jail to protect the people who are there. A lot of public health experts think that this next wave will be even more challenging and even harsher. And so without those structures in place, it's going to be catastrophic at that jail for the people there. And so we're hopeful that the court will share our concerns about the evidence that we've submitted. And we'll find out today.
Thank you, Katie, for giving that legal perspective. And now we will pass it over to Bob from the NAACP for Prince George's County.
Good morning. The people of Prince George's County deserve transparency. Our county exec, Osbrook, haven't done that so far. And I want to go back initially before they filed the lawsuit that Katie filed, 2 weeks prior to that, we attempted to set up a meeting with Mary Lou McDonough through Mark McCall. And we sent a letter over and we sent text messages, emails and so forth. And they said, "Oh yeah, we will." And they tried to explain to us that they was in compliance and that they had reduced the population in the jail. That the jail could hold 1,500 people. They was down to 525, and that they was in the individual cells. Obviously, through the lawsuit, we're discovering that is not the case. So the condition, and the public deserve to know because they have their loved ones in there. We have received several phone calls inquiring about that. The individual that's 60 years old, for example, if it's not a real serious offense, he should not be in that facility. Uh, Another thing that elected officials don't do, uh, they don't listen to the community. Uh, as you know, Mary Lou McDonough will be retired at the end of the month, and and we have to get the trust of that facility to make sure that the, our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated uh, get the fair medical treatment that they need, and listen to Michael there. Apparently, that is not happening. When you have feces, and which I found to be unacceptable, to have feces on the wall and then to give somebody a snack like they are an animal to clean up, to clean that up. That is totally unacceptable. Um, and we cannot. We just have to really crack the whip. Another thing that the county really does, if I'm not mistaken, they hire high power attorneys to come in and defend the system or individual. They did that in the case that we had with the police department. And it is unbelievable the amount of money that is spent to defend something that can be corrected very easily if they just listen to the community and listen to the inmates. The money bail problem that we have in the county, we had a study that was done on that called Advancing Money Bill. Nobody should be in jail because of lack of money. But the COVID-19 crisis is not over. And so the easiest way that they could do this without wasting money in federal court is to just comply and treat people like they are human. And I'll close on that note.
Thank you, Bob, for sharing those words. And now you will hear from Larry Stafford from Progressive Maryland.
Thank you very much, Mary Beth. The story, hearing the story from Michael should make everyone feel a bit heartbroken to hear how people are treated inside of our county's jail system. And I would say to our county executive, who is responsible for presiding over this system, that the true mark of a public leader and the true mark of an executive for our county is how the most vulnerable are protected in our county. The buck stops here with County Executive Angela Alsobrooks. And much like the police department and the Office of Pretrial Services and the Department of Corrections, which it falls under, they're controlled by our county executive, Angela Alsobrooks. And she needs to rein in these agencies, rein in these offices, and take control here. The lives of people here in Prince George's County depend on her action. Now, just like the issues within the county police department, our county executive here has received notice after notice, warning after warning that action has been required. With regards to the police department, The issue goes back as far back as perhaps 2015 or 2016, when the issues were first highlighted by the NAACP. And in 2018, there was another highlight of the issue within the police department at that time, when the officers within the department filed a federal lawsuit pointing out the racism and a culture of retaliation within the department. And again, in 2019, advocates with groups such as Community Justice and many of the groups that are on this press conference today launched a petition which got thousands of signatures from Prince George's County residents calling on that chief to be terminated. That issue, as with this issue, should have been addressed long ago. Yet it was only addressed once the current moment that we're in made continued inaction politically untenable. This today, we urge the county executive to take the action that's required to protect people's lives. We ask that she truly live up to what she said while attending numerous movement marches and protests here in Prince George's County. We say that if Black Lives Matter here in Prince George's County, that includes, it especially includes the lives of those who are most vulnerable, our incarcerated population. And it shouldn't take a lawsuit, it shouldn't take an order from a court to make the saying that Black Lives Matter a reality here. So we urge her to take action today. Thank you. And I'll hand it back to Mary Beth.
Thank you, Larry. And now that concludes our press conference. If any reporter has any questions, please leave it in the chat, and Meredith will go through and highlight those questions, lift up those questions for our speakers. And so we'll give folks a couple of minutes to populate questions inside the chat.
The first question, Donovan Conaway from the Capital Gazette asks, how many tests have been done in total? Does anyone know that information?
Katie?
Yes. Sorry, I was just looking for my unmute button. Yes, so the jail has done universal testing of everyone in the jail at the end of May. So they tested everyone who's there, and then they've also been testing all new intakes. So that's a very positive thing that they did. I think they've said that it's something like 700 tests, which is great. But a few caveats I just want to raise about the testing. So at the time when we filed the lawsuit, there were only 20 tests and 18 came back positive. Based on the evidence that I've seen so far, it looks like it's possible that the jail simply froze its testing efforts once we filed the lawsuit. So we don't actually know who was tested in between, when we filed at the end of April and when they did all these tests at the end of May. So it's, and what our experts have explained is, the spread of a virus happens on a curve. And so, like PG County, the jail experienced a spike in cases and is now in a lower part of the curve, and then the curve will go up again. We think that the spike was not captured by the testing at all, other than the fact that you have 18 of 20 cases coming back positive. However, based on when the independent inspector said that the outbreak happened in the jail, the outbreak appeared to happen about a week or two before the outbreak in PG County as a whole, which means that it was happening rapidly, more quickly than it was happening in the county at large, which is exactly what we had supposed. Another thing just to be aware of, when it comes to testing, is that it's important that the test be administered correctly. So we're going to want to seek evidence about whether there was training on the administration of the test. So we'll want to, we think that it's probably likely, based on the epidemiological curve, that there are much fewer cases now since there's already been a massive outbreak. but we will want to check the results. But the more important thing to note is that good testing plans involve retesting, to the extent possible. And they're testing new intakes to the jail, but new intakes to the jail are not the only source of infections in the jail. You have staff, contractors coming in and out of the jail all the time. And when you look at the positive tests that they found, one of those positive tests, there was a single person in the housing unit who tested positive. That case had to come from somewhere. So either other people in the unit have already been sick and passed it to that person, and he's the one who showed up on the test now, or he's passed it to other people and it was too early to capture them. I mean, it could also have been that a staff member infected a single person, although I think that's unlikely. I think what we know about COVID is that it tends to spread to many different people. So that would be very aberrant with what we know about the virus. So that's why it's important to test. Our expert generally recommends when she works with corrections officials that there's retesting every 2 weeks. But to the extent that that's not possible and you can't have retesting that frequently, you need some, apologies, you need some kind of plan for retesting. And to the extent there are gaps in your plan based on resources, you need rigorous symptom checks, evaluations of symptoms, good sick call processes, quick attention to medical care, good sanitation throughout the jail, and none of that is happening. To summarize, we think that it's a positive step. Unfortunately, we think the step was taken too late, and taking the step one time is not going to solve the problem, especially when the cases tick back up, which is inevitable. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, let's go. We have a few more questions to address, so we might address things as we go along. The next question is a two-part. One is, what is the current population of the jail? And can you elaborate on what more you want the judge to order the county to do to improve jail conditions?
I believe the exact population of the jail, I believe, is in the court filings that defendant put in. So I don't want to say something that's incorrect. I believe the number is around 540, but they'll give you the exact numbers in those filings. I think that there are several things that we would like the court to do. First, I think there's going to have to be more oversight of the measures that are actually being taken. So, for example, the court ordered training to happen. The jail assured that this very robust training was taking place at the jail. But when you look at the one training material that they submitted, the materials are out of date. So, for example, it lists symptoms of COVID. It doesn't include some of the symptoms. And only 20% of staff at the jail have actually taken it, and it's all been in the last week or so. So, it seems that there's a real mismatch between what the jail represents that it's doing and what it's actually doing. Because of that mismatch, which has been a theme throughout the case, we think that whether now or in the future, it's ultimately going to be necessary for there to be a monitor in the case to oversee compliance. It does not appear to us that the jail is going to take this seriously on its own unless something seriously changes. We also think that there should be relief along a few additional lines as well that we're still investigating. I mean, the court asked the jail to create a plan for the three biggest areas of deficiencies. And the jail created that plan, but it doesn't seem that they're actually implementing that plan. There's also a lot of flaws with the plan. So we want, to have them fix the plan. And what we've recommended to the court is, and what we've seen done in other cases, is that the court asked the jail to negotiate with the plaintiffs. And, we have access to sort of our experts who have worked to develop systems like this, that they negotiate with us to develop a good plan that will actually work in the jail. I don't know whether, it'll happen now. I do feel skeptical that there's going to be serious differences without a monitor. Another thing that we're very concerned about is that instead of taking thoughtful measures about the jail is using a really blunt instrument, which is a lockdown. These people have been on 23-in-1 lockdown. There's a few housing units where they get out maybe 2 or 3 hours a day, but for the vast majority of people, they are on 23-in-1. They get out 1 hour a day, and they've been in that status since the beginning of April, with no end in sight. That in itself is a violation of the Eighth Amendment. It is incredibly cruel to put people in that position. They only have 1 hour to call their loved ones and attorneys, so it affects their access to counsel. but also, of course, profoundly affects their mental health. And sometimes their hour out of cell takes place in the middle of the night. So they can't call anyone at that time. Another particularly troubling thing that I've heard from every single person there is that when they want access to cleaning products to clean their cells, they can only get it during their hour of out of cell time. So your hour of out of cell time, and Mr. Montgomery could speak to this much better than I can, but my understanding is you've got 1 hour. It might be at 2 a.m. That's when you can call your family, call your attorney, take a shower, clean your cell, get any recreation time you might want, read anything that you can get your hands on. That that's your only time to do that. And if you want to call your family and your attorney, by the way, even if you know you should be social distancing, you really can't. You're going to have to go up to those phones and stand inches away from someone else, or else you're not talking to your family or you're not talking to your lawyer. So the lockdown actually puts people in a really perverse position where they have to make impossible choices. And there's evidence that extreme psychological stress worsens the effects of COVID. Um, and so we think that the jail should have to have a solution that is not just the blunt instrument of an indefinite lockdown that violates the Constitution in its own right.
Thank you. We have a few more questions. Can you summarize what today's public hearing is about, and is it being shown virtually? And then whether you've gotten any update from the jail officials. But I guess that's going to come today.
So I see both questions here. I'm happy to answer those. So first of all, with respect to today's hearing, the hearing is on the evidence that was submitted. Both sides have submitted evidence about kind of what progress the jail has made to date. And so my belief is that the court is going to want to discuss that evidence, talk about whatever next steps there might be moving forward, and maybe ask both sides questions about that evidence, and decide, whether there will be more relief, expanded relief, or no relief, no further relief in the case. So that's what we think will happen today. Although, the court probably has a procedure in mind. This judge tends to come in extremely prepared. In my experience with her so far, she reads everything, every piece of paper that comes before her, she has read it. She seems like a very hardworking judge. So my guess is that we're going to come in, she's going to tell us right at the beginning of the hearing what she needs to know from us. The next question was just whether we'd received any update from jail officials after the ruling that it must improve conditions. We've received updates through the court, and we've received some documents from them. I mean, the message that the jail is sending is that there has never been any problem with their conditions and they shouldn't have to improve them at all. So they've been trying to overturn the district court's opinion. They asked the district court itself to put a stay on its order and not force them to comply with it, because they say that they've been at the forefront of this movement the entire time, which is completely unsupported by the evidence, including their own evidence. And then they've also made, an enormous number of promises in response to the court's order about what it is that they're doing in the jail. So, for example, they claim that with medically vulnerable people in particular, they're checking symptoms multiple times a day. But what we've heard from people in the jail consistently is that for a lot of people, they're not checking symptoms at all. No questions at all. To the extent they are asking people about symptoms now, they're saying things like, are you good? You feel okay? Any flu symptoms? That's it. So, we spoke to someone who recently tested COVID positive who had body aches. He didn't know that was a symptom. There's just a mismatch between what the jail says it's doing and what it's really doing. I also see this question about the nationwide shortage of everything, including testing, and whether the jail was expected to have ample tests available to test when there was a shortage. So, I mean, I think, this is a legal question, under the Eighth Amendment, whether the jail can be held responsible for shortages of resources. It's, at least one court case has said that when resources prevent the jail from taking humane measures, it can still be held responsible. But we don't think that's really an issue in this case, because even though they lacked, it might have been challenging to get adequate tests and supplies. We don't know, because there was not a robust effort to get those supplies at the beginning. So because of that, we can tell that the jail was, deliberately indifferent to the rights of the people inside of it. Because, I mean, when you hit a wall because of lack of resources, you expect to see someone at least heading towards the wall that they're about to hit. That's not what happened. I mean, they had 20 tests, they did 18. They had 20 in reserve that they had not given out, even though they had a lot of people who were symptomatic at the jail. And they had, resources that had not been used. So on top of that, even if they simply could not, despite their best efforts, get the testing done, that would be a reason to amp up your symptom screening, make sure your sick call processes are in place, and do everything else in your power to try to remedy the problem. I mean, if you can't do it one way, you would expect someone who's making a good faith effort, who's not deliberately indifferent, to be trying to find another way to achieve that result. Even if it's not quite as good as the best way, you want to see some other effort. But that's not what we see. We see a jail that is completely neglecting the rights of the people inside it, despite known dangers to them. And at this point, I mean, those dangers are abundantly clear. And so it was extremely disturbing in the past few weeks to hear about some of the profound delays in access to medical care, even after an independent inspector, plaintiff's evidence, and the court have found major problems with delays in medical care. One would think that the jail would have taken that seriously. So, I think in this particular case, that precise legal issue is not presented. It may be answered by other cases around the country, but it's not here because they didn't use the resources that they did have. And they didn't try to get more in the ways that you would expect from people who are making a good faith effort.
All right, so those are all the questions that we have. If there are any remaining questions later, we can, if you can direct them to the contacts that were sent out in the media advisory. There's a question here. Oh, there was one last question. Do we have evidence that anyone was seriously ill at the jail?
Yes. I was.
I guess I need them to elaborate, whoever, Brad Bell, could you elaborate exactly what you mean by seriously ill? What components or elements make up seriously ill? Are you asking if that person was on a ventilator? Because Mr. Michael Montgomery is someone who was tested positive and was seriously ill from the disease profile.
I just saw a question whether people were hospitalized. I just want to make a point about that. So whether or not someone was hospitalized, so the jail contends that no one has been hospitalized from the jail. We don't yet know whether or not that was true. I mean, it may be that the jail didn't transfer anyone to the hospital. That doesn't mean that they didn't need hospitalization to prevent serious physical damage. So Mr. Montgomery can tell you, I mean, when he was released, I mean, he was still having breathing problems. He may still, and he had to go to the hospital. He went to the hospital, he took himself to the hospital.
More than once.
Yeah.
You're still having breathing problems.
And we are hearing that from a lot of people at the jail. So just because someone wasn't transferred doesn't mean that they shouldn't have been transferred. I mean, the unfortunately, death is not the only really serious result of COVID. And I feel like that evidence is developing in the science as the pandemic continues. But I mean, there can be really serious damage to people's lungs, heart, and other organs because of this disease. And one thing that we've struggled with is that the jail does not appear to have a clear protocol for when to transfer to hospital. And I mean, you'll see in our evidence, there was a man who was detained in the jail. This wasn't for COVID, but he was in unbelievable pain, was vomiting, could not eat, was not transferred to the hospital. By the time the jail sent him to the hospital, and this was just a week ago, he had a perforated ulcer. The ulcer had actually burned through his stomach. He had to have emergency surgery because of the delay in sending him over to the hospital. That was entirely with that. To us, what we suspected was that was a good example of that the jail is not necessarily taking transfers seriously when they're needed. Mr. Montgomery, I saw there was a question for you. Did you see that?
Well, there's a question. I don't know whether Mr. Montgomery feels comfortable answering the question. The question is whether if you will describe your symptoms, because apparently there's a desire to have you prove that you were seriously sick.
Yeah, I don't understand that one, but I mean, this is something that everyone else has. I mean, you had headaches, you had a fever, your body is sore, you can't eat. Um, Anything that has to do with the COVID-19 is something that I had. Your eyes, the back of your eyes hurt, like you're looking at something, but your eyes is aching like pain, and you got a headache like the screws inside your head, like somebody screwing the screw on the top of your head. You have a fever. Your whole body aches from your legs, from your head to your feet. I mean, those are the symptoms of the COVID-19. That's what I had. The symptoms that I had.
I am really concerned about the sanitation condition at the prison as we had this press conference, and why they have a professional crew to come in and clean the facility. We got feces on the wall, and the COVID-19, like many buildings, there's a COVID-19 team that goes in and thoroughly clean the facility. And if the population is only at 525 roughly, or 550, or whatever it is you find out today, and they said the capacity is 1,500, they could shut down half the facility, thoroughly clean it, the ventilators and all of that. Again, this is where they don't care about the least among us.
We're almost at noon. We'll take one more question. There's one here that asks whether any inmates were placed on a ventilator, but since apparently none of them who were put in isolation were taken to the hospital, do we know anything about ventilators?
No, we're seeking evidence on all of this now. And one thing I think that we'll be looking into is what has happened to people who tested positive for COVID or were never tested for COVID but had it and were released into the community, and any hospitalizations that came after that. That's something I think in particular we'll want to look at.
Yeah, and as they've all testified today, there is a hearing today where there's going to be more discussion about what the current status is.
Right. So I think we'll conclude our press conference. One thing that I will say before we wrap up is that public health experts, including the independent medical inspector that inspected the jail, said that reducing the jail population is the best way to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. And so right now, the jail population is the lowest it has been in decades. And it really begs the question, why were those people there in the first place? And why are county officials hesitant to make sure that folks are safe, protected? And if the best way to do that is to release them, why hasn't that happened? And so again, we are calling on the county executive to release these folks. She has the power to do it immediately. There's no reason why these individuals who have been authorized by the courts to remain in this facility. So again, I want to thank the members of the media for joining us this morning. And as a reminder, the federal hearing will happen today at 1 o'clock. And we encourage everyone to sign up and listen in. Thank you all.